Hey guys, welcome to our first episode or tutorial or whatever you want to call it. I don't even know. Cable sleeving. Now I'm going to break this down into probably 3 videos because there's just so much to cover. It would take probably about 20 minutes just a video just to show you the actual sleeving of the cables, and that doesn't get into the tools, the materials, or figuring out the layout of your case to run your cables through, or setting up a workspace in order to put those cables together the easiest way. So first one we're going to do is tools and materials. I'll give kind of a brief overview, kind of fly through it a little bit and talk a little bit about our sleeving. But first off, let's start with tools. What to pick first? So we're going to start with probably the most important, well they're all important, tool that you're going to need, and that is wire cutters. You're going to need to cut wire and cut sleeve. Now I use 2 sets because wire will tend to dull a set the more you cut, so I use 1 set for wire, 1 set for sleeve, and that way I'm always cutting really good edges on my sleeve. Just put all that. Next up, we've got wire strippers. I've got 3 different varieties. Now, most people are going to have something like these 2 sitting around their house, you know, the built-in crimper and all that jazz. And they work. Don't get me wrong, they work fine. But I've got one that actually is it's a Nipix, and it sets the strip length at a certain distance. That way I'm not trying to always line up my strippers. This makes life a whole lot easier and a whole lot faster. If you're planning on doing a lot of sleeving, this is a good investment. But if you're just sleeving 1 case and you don't want to drop whatever these cost, these will work. You'll just have to take more time and effort into actually stripping your wires. Next up, crimpers. Not always a necessity. You can sleeve the wire set that your PSU comes with. But a lot of times it is easier, and it's my preference to make a full set of new wires. So you'll need something to crimp pins, and these are about the only way to do it. I'm sure you could figure out a way to do it without these, but these really make life easy when you're trying to crimp pins. What else have we got? Another pretty definite need are pin pullers. This is for ATX, these are for fans, and this is for Molex. The Molex, not so important anymore since a lot of people are going away from it, finally. Fan, kind of the same way. If you're not messing with your fan cables, you won't need this. And also, you can actually pull your pins out of your fan connectors with a knife, small screwdriver, X-Acto knife, anything like that. You've just got to have something to press the tap and then pull the wire out. This actually makes it easy because you can jam it in and get all 3 or 4 at once, but not a necessity. The ATX is definitely a necessity because this is the only way to get those pins out. I'm sure you could shove a couple pieces of metal in next to the pins to catch the tabs and yank them, but this is lifesaver. And don't skimp on buying one of these. Buy a good one. These tabs are real thin and they tend to break a lot. So this set's lasted me probably 4 or 5 builds, and doesn't seem like it's anywhere close to breaking, so that's good. I've already gone through I think 2 or 3 before I got to this one. Next up, random pliers. You will have to cut random wires. Sometimes your pins won't come out and you'll have to kind of force them. I've got another small set of pliers that I use to actually jam pins in if the sleeving's a little thick and it doesn't want to go in all the way. Just a couple different sets here and there. Not a necessity, but they can come in handy. Scissors, kind of the same way, not a necessity. I use these to cut heat shrink because the heat shrink I use is just a hair bigger than what my wire cutters will cut, and you're going to need a whole bunch of little bitty pieces of heat shrink for the style we're going to do. So a pair of scissors is really handy. I'm almost to the point where I can't reach where I want to put stuff. X-Acto knife, always handy to have. There are spots where you'll have to cut some sleeving, and this will be the way to do it. Bic lighter, or really any disposable lighter. We are going to have to melt some of this sleeving down, and Zippos don't work very well, but these little cheap disposables do. So go spend the money, spend $1, pick up a cheap disposable lighter. It's really handy. Super glue, there will be times you glue things together, and that includes your fingers, so be careful. I also use a small heat gun. This doesn't put out a lot of heat, but it's enough to use on heat shrink, and that's usually all I ever use it for. The only time I use this is when I'm doing the wiring. And last but not least, second to last, tape. The way I set up my workspace, I use a lot of tape, and I use the green automotive from 3M because you can see your writing on this a whole lot better than trying to write on blue. So I always have 3 or 4 rolls of this laying around. Also, on top of being able to write on it, it's easy to tear because it is masking tape. It doesn't leave adhesive, and it also doesn't pull paint. So, and watch out because there is a green concrete tape that will pull paint and will leave adhesive. So make sure you get the automotive stuff. You can order it through like Amazon or from MNPC Tech, or even if you've got a auto parts store that has a paint department, they'll always have this stuff. The last tool, it's not really a tool, it's kind of a tool, a pen and some paper. You'll need to write down your pinouts, anything to help you keep all these wires that you're going to be messing with straight. You can also use it to make little notes to yourself, but the idea is that you want to record everything you do, taking the wires apart so that you can put them back together the same way. So that's super handy. And I think that's the tools. Next, materials, not sleeving yet though. Let's move this. While you're getting all your stuff together, if you're replacing the wires or cutting an end off and shortening them up, you're going to need pins. You can get these at places like Mod 1, Mainframe. Don't get them off Amazon because they'll try to sell you like 25 for $16. These things are like $1/4 a pop for $5. So all sorts, male and female ATX, fans, Molex, SATA connectors if you get the certain style of SATA connector. And then with those come, God, these things are hard to pick up off the table. With those come your connectors. Standard connectors. You don't have to buy connectors. You can reuse yours. I like buying new ones because they won't have the writing from the factory. And also, sometimes you actually get better connectors. Some brands, man, they're just hard to put pins in and hard to pull pins out of. And also you can buy like 8-pin VGAs, and instead of having to use a 6+2, which I think is it's a great idea for universal wiring, horribly ugly when you try to plug it in and make it look like something in a case. So I always buy 8-pin VGAs, so that whenever I sleeve my VGAs, I can actually just use 8s and 6s instead of a 6+2. And you can get those at any mod supply store. Also, one note on that, there are 2 different styles. Let's see if these are them. No, these are the same. There are 2 different styles of 8-pin. There's an 8-pin VGA, or PCIe, and then there's a 8-pin EPS. Now, EPS is for your CPU. It's what ties into the motherboard. Those are not the same connectors. So if you do have to have a 8-pin CPU connector, get an EPS, and don't get them confused because you can't plug EPS into VGA or VGA into EPS. So, little side note, saves some trouble. Not that I ever had that problem myself. And then while you're shopping for all your connectors and pins, if you want cable combs, these are awesome to have. Not necessity, but they come in different styles. Gosu Mods, this is MNPC Tech Billet, and you can find the old school acrylic clears. Basically, pick whatever style you like. You might want to check because some brands won't fit larger cables in them, or they're kind of difficult. So, all right. One more thing on materials: wire. Wire is pretty cheap if you buy it in the right places. This is Remington, and it's a brand that's on Amazon. It is the exact same spec that the PSUs I use have. So this is basically the exact same wire that they're using to wire their PSUs up. So you can pick a spool of this stuff up in red, black, white, green, yellow, blue for about $10, and super cheap. And get on there, and kind of a mess. But one note about wire: it depends on your sleeve color, what color of wire you actually buy. So if you're sleeving red, buy red wire. If you're sleeving black or gray, go black. If you're sleeving with a yellow, orange, or white, you want white wire, because that stuff will change the tint of your sleeve. Oh, getting dry. Did I say that was the last? I lied. One more thing before we get into sleeve: heat shrink. This is a good 1/4 inch 3-to-1 heat shrink. You'll want quite a bit of this. You've got to use a little 1/4 inch snip of it for every pin, every end of your sleeve. So you'll use quite a bit of it. And like I said, this is 3-to-1. You can get it at a lot of mod shops. You can use the 2-to-1 that you're going to find at like your Home Depot and Lowe's and your electronic stores. But I do like 3-to-1. You can get a bigger size, and it still crimps down on everything just as nice. So that's our heat shrink. And plus you can also get 50 foot at a time, which is really handy. So now sleeve. The reason we're all here, right? Sleeving comes in a couple of different styles. You've got your paracords, which is a nylon braided cording with, if you buy it in certain places, it's meant to tie stuff down, so it's got strands on the inside. These strands, the number of strands will determine, well, the number of strands and the diameter of the sleeve will determine what model, I guess, what kind is. And they go in like 95, 325, 550, and those are the weights that they can actually hold. This is 550. It's got, I think, 7 strands. 325, I think, has 3. And if you look at these side by side, they kind of look about the same, but the 325 is a narrower braid, or has a smaller diameter, so it fits, to me, tighter on the wires and looks a little better. But you can use 550 as well. It slides over things a whole lot easier. So it's kind of a trade-off. The nice thing about 550 is you can probably run down to your craft store or your home improvement store, and they're going to have bundles of this for sale. Easy to find, different colors. I think it's like $10 for 100 feet, and you definitely want to get at least 100 feet for a full set. 325 is a little harder to find. Most places don't carry it. I did run into it at Hobby Lobby one time, bought some red, and they discontinued selling it like 2 months later when I needed more, so I actually had to order some online. And the worst thing about not ordering enough, and also online, because I had to order 2 different colors to make sure I had the right red. So that's our paracord. Cons of paracord: it tends to grab everything. The ends don't cut as nice as like the other style, and when it's going over pins, any stray wires, any stray sharp edges will tend to kind of gouge this and pull on the strands. But when it's in a case, it does look a lot better than most PET. Oh man, almost done. PET. This is a plastic sleeve. I've got a couple of different brands. This is from Electroduct. They're a more of a wholesale supplier of sleeving and stuff, and it's not as high quality as the stuff you're going to find on mining shops and mining stores online, like Telios or MDPC, they're X. So what basically the difference is the premium brands, excuse me, they're going to have a little larger diameter and they're going to have a little better weave, so that when they're on the wire, they actually don't show the wire underneath as much. They're a lot tighter. I guess tighter weave basically is what you come down to. But that also makes the wires thicker, a little more difficult to deal with. This gray and this set of red and black, I used them in the same case. I had originally gone with Telios, got them all in there, couldn't get the wires bent around the case, so I went with a different color totally, but also a much narrower sleeve, which let me bend the wires a lot easier. The only problem with this stuff from Electroduct is like I say, it's not as dense of a weave, so when it expands over the wires, you're going to get a little bit of bleed through. And you can really tell, my camera will never show it, but when you spring this stuff together, this Electroduct, this cheaper stuff, you can see is pretty much, you know, one strand per cross. So it looks like this. But the Telios and the other brands, they use a smaller filament, and so you've got multiple strands in that cross going both ways. So it does make for a better look, but I mean, that's personal preference, so I'm not going to tell you which way. As far as the difference between PET and paracord, price-wise, I think they're pretty similar. Paracord, I think, looks a little better in a case. PET is, God, like 1,000 times easier to work with. Oh, one thing I didn't mention about paracord is you can buy it without that stranding inside. So that's normally how you'll get it from mod stores. But if you go to Home Depot, they're going to have strands in it. But yeah, PET just goes on so much easier. But you know, it's personal preference. Everybody has their choice and what they like. So I'm just giving you kind of a broad overview of what there is, and you can go your own way. So I think that covers it. And up next, we're going to actually do something. We're actually going to sleeve a wire. I know the 15 minutes I've been sitting here mumbling about stuff seems pretty boring, and it's only going to get more boring. So hang in there.